In this next section, we're going to drop having to spend 10 minutes configuring the freestyle job via a graphical user interface and instead do something known as a pipeline as code. That means we're going to use code to define how the entire build and pipeline process works. In order to do this with Maven though, we're going to need to install a plugin. So manage Jenkins, manage plugins, and specifically we're going to install the Pipeline Maven plugin. You want to make sure you use the Pipeline Maven integration plugin because that's what provides the with Maven environment capabilities. Additionally, because we're going to be working with pipelines, it's recommended that you use the Blue Ocean plugin. This is going to give us a more friendly view into watching the job work and see how the different stages interact. The core of this pipeline is the code. In this case, we're using what's known as a Jenkins-scripted pipeline. This is a relatively free way of using Groovy code to define how the pipeline works. It starts by declaring a node section, which contains the content of your build. The first step in a pipeline like this is going to be to have to check out the project, in this case do a git clone. We're going to use a special command, in this case git, to pull the main branch and refer to our credentials we set up earlier, github_com, then with the SSH URL. This will cause the project to be cloned as soon as the job runs. Then we're going to have another stage which is going to actually handle the deployment or the publishing. The way this works is that we first have to use what's known as a with credentials binding. In this case, we're saying we want to pull a username and password, the one we set up earlier, where we're going to pass in the password as this environment variable and the username as the NVM username environment variable. In the next section, this is optional, we're going to use with Maven. This is what's going to allow us to both go back to using the wrapper, but also there's going to be special Maven tracking that happens behind this. More importantly though, remember that settings XML file? We still have to deal with that, and using this with Maven binding is going to allow us to pass in the settings XML file as we've already checked into the repository. Just as previously, when we had to pass in the variables for the repository ID, the username and password and revision, we're doing the same here. We're just doing it explicitly using the -d parameters that are being passed in directly to the command line. And finally, where in the freestyle job we had to go in and select all these options for Jacoco and JUnit and PMD, we can use special functions inside of the Groovy code here to deal with Jacoco, to publish the JUnit reports, and then when it comes to the Next Generation Warnings plugin, it's 2 steps behind the scenes. We have to 1, scan for issues and tell it that it's PMD in the location, and then finally we have to publish those issues. You may be asking yourself, well, there's a lot of complexity here. How do I know what I can run inside a pipeline and what I can't? Any pipeline is going to have the option to click on pipeline syntax, and once there, you can actually find different options like git, give it the name of the repository, the branch, and the credentials. And then generate a pipeline script. This is what you use to generate pipeline code if you don't know how, by navigating the same graphical user interface you used when building a freestyle job. When it comes to setting up the job, you're going to go to New Item, give it a name, and select Pipeline. Also consider we have the same CI principles we want to adhere to here. The idea is that any change to our code base is going to result in triggering this. However, because we're using pipelines as code, we can actually include the code to either pull or rely on a webhook inside of our pipeline ourselves. But we're going to skip this complexity for now. When it comes to how to do the pipeline, it's highly recommended that you don't do the pipeline on Jenkins. You want any code to live with your code base. So in this case, we're going to pull the pipeline from SEM. So in our case, git, our scripted project with our credentials, making sure to tell it it's the main branch. And then to look for the script file at this path. Then we're going to build our project where it's going to pick up that Jenkins file and construct the pipeline automatically. We can also, in this case, use the Blue Ocean view that we installed earlier for looking at the pipeline in a more user-friendly fashion. You see that it now all worked. When we go back to the job page, you're going to see all the same content you had on the freestyle job, but because we use with Maven with that Maven pipeline plugin, we're going to get some artifacts. It's going to tell us that where it got deployed to, along with the same type of reporting output. For example, PMD, our coverage trend, along with our test results. You can additionally verify the upload by going to the Packages section of our repository, where you can see as build 1 it worked and got uploaded as version 1.1.